There it is.
What's up, guys? I am Drew with Comic Slate, here with
Kyle, not Kevin.
And once again, we are fortunate, lucky enough to have with us the great, the talented, the immensely successful Aaron Lopresti.
Woo! Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Yes, and so we can officially say, because we had you back on in November, and it was still fulfilling, but we can say now, truly congratulations.
Yes.
Over 150,000 on Indiegogo. Let's bring it up. We got it right here. Over $151,803 on Indiegogo. Over 2,600 backers.
Wow.
That is wild.
Yeah, I was. We had a late rush on there. I was doing steadily. It was good the whole time, but we had a really kind of a late rush there when I was, and when I announced we were closing it out in a week or whatever. And I think we could have kept going, but I had already sent my numbers to the printer, and I was worried that I wasn't going to have enough. And
wow,
because I originally I should have had like almost 600 extra copies, but we got hit so hard so late that I ended up with less than 200 after all the fulfillment was done. So I will be a little bit smarter this next campaign and order heavier so that if we get a rush at the end, I'll still have extra copies. So we still have a few left, and people are contacting me about, getting some copies. Of course, I've added new ones to I've added that to the campaign, the new campaign, so people can get this graphic novel with the new campaign if they missed it. But like I said, I've only got limited numbers of those, and they are going fast, so that's a good thing, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Excuse me, I'm fighting a cough right now, but that's a good problem to have.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I told my wife when because she was like, "Well, how many of these should you order?" And I'm like, "Look, do you know how many boxes 500 copies is? I said it'll fill up a room. We're going to be sitting on them for 10 years, and well." Turned out that it didn't have to sit on them very long, but you never know, right? So I was a lot of stuff I did with this campaign. I did very conservatively because I didn't, I got sketchbooks over here that I printed, 10 years ago, and I still have copies, sitting here. And so it's like I didn't want to have a bunch of inventory sitting around, and now I kind of wish I did, but oh well. We live and learn, right?
Yeah, very true. And we got MG here. Already got my copy ordered. Outstanding.
Appreciate that.
Outstanding. And we can say as well, Kyle and I, we both ordered separately. I ordered the 3 cover pack.
Excellent. Thank you.
The 3-pack. And
yeah, so I got the secret tier because I signed up early. I got the 3-pack. I was backer number 3, by the way.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Beat me, but that's fine. So number 3 in there. I got the 3-pack also because those covers are unbelievable. Your covers are amazing. The fact they are so different. It's like, and the homages you have, I mean, they're just absolutely spectacular. The colors, everything.
Well, here's a little inside information. I shouldn't share it with my my colleagues because it's funny. We're colleagues, but we're also competitors,
Absolutely.
And but if you're going to do multiple covers, they need to be drastically different from one another. And I think too often times guys will say, hire someone to do a cover for them, and essentially they'll do basically the same type of thing that your other cover is, just by a different artist. And so I try to really do very, very different covers to put the pressure on the customer to get all 3, right?
Yes,
you got me.
You got me
it's
too.
It's like you got the Tales of Suspense homage right here. That got me. But this one right here, you had the Tomb of Dracula. I'm like, damn it.
Yeah. Adams, of course I'm going to get that.
Thing is, I'm running out of options. What am I going to do for the next campaign? I don't know. I'm going to
Go back to the old Rolodex. It's like, oh, what else do
I'm sure there's like Vampirella covers you can homage, or Gunslinger, probably Gunslinger comics and Marvel that you can homage.
Old Ghost Rider.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have 2 of them already figured out, because one will be, like this wraparound cover where it just is what you consider a contemporary or modern cover, right? And then I like to do the throwbacks just because I'm old. And so I have something that's kind of a throwback that I haven't done yet that I'll be doing on the next campaign. But that 3rd cover may be tricky. We'll see. I actually have another cover coming for this one if the guy ever gets it done.
Oh, when is the kit Carter Uranus cover. Is that, you know what that means? Or
Oh, Daniel. Well, if you watch our Sunday show at all, we did a thing. We always have this segment. It's Shelley knows, right? We ask Shelley questions to see what she knows, and we did one on the solar system. And I was shocked because she's a teacher and she's taught math and physics. She doesn't know the planets of the solar system. So she kept naming everything Uranus because that was the only one she knew other than Earth. And so now that's Uranus has been this ongoing joke for like months now. So, but Kit Carter is the space girl behind me there on that banner.
Oh, okay.
And when this campaign hits 100K, I'm going to add 15 pages of Kit Carter. So you're going to actually have the Wraith of God story and then 3 backups in this book. So it'll be pushing it close to 100 pages. So it's a good value for $25.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're going to be there in no time. You're already at 85,000. So where were you at this point with the first campaign? From what I recall, I don't think you were this close to 85,000 last time.
No, I don't remember exactly at this point because we're just a little over a weekend, but I did open the first 24 hours at 36,000. And this one I opened at 62,000 in the first 24 hours. When I got 45 days into the campaign, when it finally went to in demand, it was at 104,000. So I expect to be ahead of that pace. How high it can go, I'd like to hit 3,000 backers this time. We got to, you saw 2660 on the first one, and I'd love to get to 3,000 because to me, it's not just the dollar amount, it's how many people are actually reading the book. And I know a lot of people take different approaches to this, that it's all about raise as much money as you can because you're trying to fund the project, and it doesn't really matter how many readers you have, it matters how many dollars you've raised. But I kind of think that, I mean, obviously you have to hit a certain number to pay for the project, but I would like to think that can grow my audience, and if it was 2660 last time, it'd be great if it was 3,000 this time. Then maybe if it's 3,500 the next time, it makes fulfillment harder, but at the same time, you're getting a broader audience reading your book, which is the ultimate goal for sustained success, I think.
Yeah, and you are a publisher now. So, I mean, your ultimate goal, you're operating a business, is growth. So, yes, you should be expecting growth. I would, 3,000 is very doable at this point.
Yeah,
I would hope so, because we're going to go, I mean, this is just the first 30 days, and I probably, we did some research, and I talked to some guys, and really a lot of people go for that, they go the first 30 days, and they do another 30 days, and they go in demand. But the sweet spot is really between 30 and 45 days. And then things just significantly slow down. So keeping it open and doing kind of the circus promotions tour for another, 2 weeks when I should be, working on the book full time, seems kind of a waste to me, because when it's in demand, it's still open. You can still get the message out to people. So we probably will end up going 45 days total on this before it goes into in demand. But we'll see. We'll see how it develops as it goes along.
Very nice.
Yeah.
And you're including Garbage Man in the backup.
Yeah. Well, I had the Garbage Man trade paperback attached to the first campaign, as I do this one, because there's still some copies available. And what I sold almost 600 copies of that trade paperback through the campaign.
Wow.
And so a lot of people got introduced to Garbage Man for the first time. And so now I'm getting, the inevitable questions. Well, when are we going to see more Garbage Man? And so I was like, well, okay, how can I do Wraith of God and Garbage Man at the same time? Well, I can add a Garbage Man backup story. And it's also going to have a nightclub backup story, which was introduced in the trade paperback, but also part of the epilogue. That, of course, you guys have the book and read it, so you know what that is. So we're going to get a solo story of a nightclub, as well as another Garbage Man adventure, along with the lead, which is going to be the Wraith of God. And then, of course, like I said, when we hit 100, that Kit Carter gets added in there as well. And so you're going to have multiple backups. And it seems like for me, the smartest way to expand my universe, introduce new characters without doing multiple campaigns, which, you know, you can only do so many pages a year. And with all the extra work that goes into promoting and fulfilling and dealing with the printers and dealing with all this stuff, I figured, well, I was going to do an anthology at first, and I thought, well, I can't really, I don't want to kill the Wraith of God brand right when it's getting hot, right? So it's like, I had to launch it as a Wraith of God book with these as backups. But I think that's a system that will work, that allow me to get those extra character stories in there to satisfy people's curiosity. And like I said, expand the line a little bit without having to do multiple books, which would be difficult to manage by myself.
Absolutely. And I was rereading Garbage Man actually this past few days ago. Mm-hmm. And my favorite story is The Moss is Always Greener. That story, yeah, gets me every time. I love that story.
Thank you. That was one I had some people complain about because, they thought that I killed Garbage Man. Because when it originally was released through DC Comics, right? It was in
Is it Strange Worlds?
Weird Worlds.
Weird Worlds. Okay.
So I mean, it was an anthology miniseries, right? So I did 6 Garbage Man, and that's why the graphic novel is broken up the way it is because they were 10-page little stories, right, for each issue, because it was an anthology book. And so what happened was at the end of Weird Worlds, which would have been the Moss is Always Greener story, was the last Garbage Man story in there. Mm-hmm. You know, he gets shot with the shotgun and is floating down the river towards, at that time, Gotham City, which has now been turned into Murnau City. Mm-hmm. And then it didn't come out. The next miniseries, which was My Greatest Adventure, which was basically the same thing, it was another anthology miniseries of 6 issues. It came out months later. I mean, it wasn't right after it. It was months later. So what had happened was people that read Weird Worlds never knew about the second miniseries, My Greatest Adventure, and so they never got the tail end of the Garbage Man stuff. So they were pissed that they go, well, what is this? You kill the guy off at the, you know, and well, no, you got to read the next ones. But then I also had people picking up My Greatest Adventure who had never heard of the Weird World miniseries. You got Garbage Man floating in the river, right, to Gotham City, half dead, and that's where it started for these people. And they're like, I didn't even know there was there's part to this, you know.
You know, honestly, if you think about that in a way, that's a cool, mysterious opening for a character. It's like, wait a minute, who is this character we're following? You know, how did he wind up in this river? How did he wind up in Gotham? Yeah, it's like a Stephen King, the original Stand, how that opened up. Yes, you got the car crash at the gas station. That's how it opened. And you didn't know anything about the military base and all that. It's like, whoa, that's pretty cool.
Well, one of the things I like to do when I'm writing is I like to get right into the current action and then flashback pieces as we go along. And I did that in Wraith of God as well. And so there was some flashback stuff after that point in Garbage Man, but it still never explained why he was floating in the river, you know. But it gave you enough backstory. I think you could probably figure out what was going on. Because really the first 6 issues were just him fighting a different monster every story. They were all part of, you know, some sort of, they were affected by Titan Pharmaceuticals to some degree, creating these different creatures. And so there was the kind of the subtext or the secondary thread going through there about Titan Pharmaceuticals and the crime and all that kind of stuff that was going on. But it didn't really become the full focus of the story until the second 6 parts. So I guess people were able to kind of pick it up and kind of figure out what was going on, even though it started right in the middle. And they were like, oh, I guess he's just floating down the river.
I love this image right here. It reminds me of, I think it's King Pumpkin from Sludge.
Lord Pumpkin.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, it just looks exactly like him. I love it right there.
King Pumpkin. Maybe I'll use that. Well, the funny thing is, Garbage Man is, in a lot of ways, he's part sludge and part Swamp Thing, and the story behind Garbage Man was that when I first went over to DC from Marvel, I was talking to Dan DiDio about doing some writing, because that was one of the things that kind of ticked me off at Marvel. I had some projects, or a particular project, a Man Thing. I wanted to do a giant-sized Man Thing, right? And I had the whole thing plotted out and ready to go, and they were saying, "Oh yeah, we can do that. No problem. Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do that." And they just kept pushing me off, and I never got to do it. And then some other stuff happened that ticked me off, and so I went over to DC. And one of the things I said to Dan was, I said, "Look, and I want to do some writing." I said, "I don't want to write a regular book, but I do have ideas for things that like a miniseries or a one shot, and I'd like the opportunity to do those things, or at least have you give them your attention so you can say yes or no, right?"
Yep.
Rather than just ignoring it completely. And he was like, "Oh yeah, I got no problem with that." And then he said, speaking of which, he said, "Well, we need a monster for the DCU." He said, because Swamp Thing was being held captive by Vertigo at the time.
Mhm.
And even though they're the same company, they're actually not the same company. And so Vertigo had Swamp Thing, and they would not give it back to DC at that time to use as a regular character in the DCU. And that's Dan's a monster guy, Dan DiDio, and he wanted a monster book or a Hulk book or something like that. So I said, well, let me give you something. Let me take a crack at it. And so I came up with Garbage Man, which is really sort of how I would, I wrote 4 or 5 issues of Sludge because Gerber was always late with scripts. And the issues I did were all Sludge versus monsters, right? And every time Gerber wrote a script, it was crime stories, right? So it was like, this is how I would do Sludge if I was writing it full time. It would be this, monster book. And so I've got little tip of the hats to the Malibu stuff in there with, of course, this image here with the pumpkin heads. And
Yeah.
And it was designed to replace Swamp Thing. So I wanted it to be kind of like a classic sort of monster book that, when these books first came to realization back in the early 70s, that's the kind of feel I wanted the character to have. I didn't want to get too esoteric. I didn't want it to be about environmentalism. I didn't want it to be about, weird satanic spiritualism, bizarre stuff. I just wanted it to be this, science gone wrong and, fighting other monsters in that same category. Cause that's what I enjoyed when I was a kid. So that's how I designed the character. And so whenever I can give a little tribute back to its, pardon the expression, the roots of where this character came from, I'll do it. So that's my little nod to Malibu right there.
I would love, I know it won't happen. Sludge v. Garbage Man. I know it probably won't happen, but I would love to see that.
Well, you'll never see it because Marvel will not use the Malibu characters.
Jeez.
There's too many. I can't say what the stipulations are, but there's stipulations attached to using those characters that they do not want to be involved with. So
that's a shame. There's a
they
great
just bought it. They bought Malibu to keep DC from buying it because DC was serious about buying Malibu and using it, and Marvel just came in over the top with a higher bid just so DC couldn't get them, and then they just buried them.
And they're buried somewhere, like in the Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly where they are. To answer this question, Gabe is coloring the Wraith of God story. Dan Lawless is coloring the Garbage Man story. And the nightclub story, I have someone in mind, but I haven't contacted him yet about it. So we'll leave that unsaid for the moment.
Nice.
All right.
I love this page right here.
And then I'll be coloring the Kit Carter stuff myself.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
I love this page right here.
Yeah. When I was watching you do that live on your stream, I was like, I love this.
It turned out I really wanted it to be creepy, and it turned out as creepy as I hoped it would, which, you're never quite sure.
Yeah.
And Gabe did a great job coloring it. And I'm really, really pleased with these first 3 preview pages that we were showing on the campaign, and just the work I did on it and the work that Gabe did on it. I'm just really, really pleased. I think it's the best stuff with Wraith of God that we've done so far, which is what you want, right? You want it better each time. So
yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's better. And I didn't think that was even possible. I mean, but it is. I'm so excited. So
I am too, to get working on this. It's like I got to get off the promotion trail and get to work on this, man.
Speaking of which, I mean, if this is it's had a big reception. You've sold out almost all your big tiers are gone.
Yeah, all the original artwork is gone.
Wow.
It went in the first couple hours.
Wow.
I'm jealous.
And to be a character, that's gone. Wow.
Well, the fun thing, and you guys know this because you have the book, but what I did with Be a Character is I got this idea late. This wasn't originally promised to the backers, but I thought, wouldn't it be fun if we mentioned, and I contacted the guys that bought their images in the book to make sure I was okay if I used their name, because everybody's got an avatar, right? And they may not want their real names out there. So I said, is it okay if I use your real name? And they're like, of course. So then I put in there, like Paul Brill, not Paul Brillart, but Fox Mulder is his name on. Oh, I shouldn't have given that away, should I? But anyway, so I did just out him. Anyway, so he's on there. And so I got two guys whose names are on there, but then it says as the character they're portraying in the book, like you'd see in a movie credit or something, right? So it's there on the title page. Yeah. And so I thought, and so I thought that was kind of a cool thing. So you get, not only do you get your likeness in the book, and you get the original art that you were drawn on, but you get your name right down there on the title page as a character in the book, which I thought was kind of fun. So
yeah. And hey, they're gone. They're sold out. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. So that's the thing. It's like you think, well, maybe I'll do 4 or 5 of those, but it's like drawing a person's likeness and then actually creating a character that they can be in the book that doesn't seem forced.
Yeah.
Is challenging. So I had to make sure that I had spots in the stories that, I can insert him here and it'll be just smooth, right? It won't feel like, oh my gosh, he stuck this guy in here because the guy gave him money. It feels like it's part of the story. And that's kind of important to me that I don't do that, because I don't want it to feel gimmicky or cheesy. I want it to feel like it's part of the story. And this guy just happened to get his likeness put in as this character that was already in the story. And so that I had to make sure I had a couple slots there that I could use them in. So one of them will be in the Wraith of God story, and one of them will be in the nightclub story. So
very nice.
And then unfortunately, there's no room in the Garbage Man story for any guest stars because they're all zombies in that story. So calling somebody all decayed, probably, oh, there you are. You're kind of like, it doesn't really look like me. But if you were dead,
that would be a cool perk. Do you have yourself zombified?
That would be sweet.
Yeah.
I guess probably some people would go for it, but it'd be like pretty hard to convince somebody that that's me.
That was them.
Yeah, is that really
me? You see? Yeah.
Let's get the hairline.
Yeah,
right
my
there.
hair.
Yeah.
I guess I could put name tags on them, right? And they would say,
there you go.
Yeah, they worked at a Costco or something. Yeah, hi.
Yeah, exactly.
That could work.
So, Kyle and I, we have read and reviewed quite a few, if not most of the Indiegogo Comicscape books.
Mm-hmm.
And we have our own ranking right here. We've made, Ethan has seen it, and a few others. More writers are telling us, hey, review my book. Like, okay, we'll get to it.
Hold on.
But right now you're at the top of the heap right now.
With only an 8.5.
Okay.
Squeeze that into a 9, don't you think? Like if I'm the top, I should be the 9. Now I know you guys are going to come after me now, but I'm ready to.
No, this is great. So we came up with this grading system. I watched Dave Portnoy's pizza reviews from Barstool Sports. I don't know if you're familiar with him. So he goes around and he rates pizza all over the world, and he has it out of a 10.0 scale. His rationale is there is no 10.
Okay.
So everything, if it's
because then it's perfect, right? So is anything really perfect? Okay, I'll give you that.
So there is no perfect book. So any good pizza, 9.2, 9.4. He doesn't do 9.0. So that's basically what we're trying to base this off of. There's no 10. So
an 8.5 is still a really good grade, is what you're telling me.
Anything above a 7 is a good book.
Yeah. So like if you look at our chart here, like we got Ethan next with
Wreck Planet.
Then we got Blood Honey. Then you got Iron Sights and Billy Tucci's second She book, Expendables, Nexus, Monster MD. Then when you get to 7, 6.5, this is where a lot of the books are right now. They're just really, they're good. 7.0s, they're good.
All books, right?
Yeah, they're good. They're good reads. But when you get below that, it's like you can really flip a coin. If you have extra money, you can spend them. You can give it a shot. But when you get below that, it's like that's when we get to our SMEs and Skip-Its down here. It's like, really don't waste your money.
Marginally average.
Yeah.
Well, see, that's what you're everybody's favorite when you're on the top of the list, but you get down in that meh range, and then you got guys going, I hate those Curtis guys.
But then that's fair. I mean, the thing is, we have backed all of these books. It's like, so it's not like we're getting them free and reading them and being like, everything's a 10 or everything's an 8.
Right.
It's like, no, it's like I've spent, I don't know, 100 and some odd bucks on your campaign, another 90, another 100 actually. It's like, and with Ethan, I've spent, Jesus,
I've spent over $1,000.
Yeah,
maybe
almost.
$2,000.
I mean, some of these, we're spending money for this. So we want it to be good, but we can then also say, objectively,
how is the story?
Yeah. So I
think that's fair. It's just tough being a reviewer, you know?
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. And Bruce, I told Kyle, Bruce Lee said something where it's like the quote was, you must have the bravery to be hated. You must have the strength to be hated.
Right.
And that's the way I see it. It's like we have to be prepared to be hated.
Yeah,
and
it's like we're gonna take shots at people, and that's fine.
And
well, it's, you know, I oftentimes felt like I should go on and review comics once in a while, but it's like it's against protocol to like badmouth other professionals, and even if it's constructively or whatever, even though that rule seems to have been broken on Twitter.
Yeah, recently. What rule?
But I tend to still, sort of being old school, I tend to, you know, try to adhere to that. Because I don't know. I mean, all this is subjective, right? And so it's like, this is your opinion, and that's kind of thing, and that's fine. I think you guys, that's fine that outside the industry you do that, but I think it's a little tough to do that within the industry, because a lot of times you're commenting on people that are maybe you've been friends with for 20 years or something, and they put a book out and you're like, you know, I better not say anything.
Well, that's fair. And then, you know what opens you then up to criticism as well. It's
right.
The issue we have with like your boy Zach. I mean, he criticizes everything, and rightfully so, because a lot of it's garbage. But then when he's putting several books out and we're reading them, and it's just like, that's not that good. I mean, you had that double-edged sword. And it's a tough job, but I enjoy doing it.
And honestly, Kyle knows I'm might have to end up pulling back from my reviews, because I've got so much work writing coming down the pike, like with my Born of Blood series and working with Murat Michaels. I've got quite a few Murat Michaels projects I'm working on right later this year, and it's like, I don't know if I'm going to keep writing. It's like, I don't know if I can keep reviewing, because I'm going to open myself up to much more criticism, you know?
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, that's right. Because people are still, whether they admit it or not, are petty. And, you know, if you say something negative about me, boy, I'm going to, as soon as your book comes out, I'm going after you, kind of thing. And, but I mean, I think people enjoy watching reviews. You know, it saves them the trouble sometimes of having to, well, maybe I shouldn't back that, or, oh, I should definitely get this, kind of thing. Might help sway them, as long as you guys are being objective and don't allow yourself to be caught up in the, oh yeah, Aaron was super nice, we have to be really nice to his book, or whatever the case may be, right? Because it's on us to give you guys a good product, and if we're not doing it, you have every right to say, you know, he charged me $25 for this, and it's not really worth it. So,
yeah, and it gives. I think why we created this also is that, one, it keeps us accountable to ourselves, and two, it gives you guys a benchmark, Comicsgate and everybody else, that you guys don't necessarily have editors. You don't have this system in place.
You don't really have people reviewing them.
You don't have people reviewing them at all. So it keeps you guys accountable. Like, you see yourself as an 8.5, and Ethan sees himself as an 8 or an 8.3. And then it's going to be like, well, damn, I want to do better than him, and I want to do better than you. And it's like, you see an 8.5. I want to stay the king. I want to produce more. I think it just gives that fun camaraderie and that battling of who can be better.
Well, and the biggest challenge is, I mean, most of us are not. I mean, some people like will hire a freelance editor or something, but I think most of us just don't want the hassle of someone else's opinion. Not from the standpoint that someone else couldn't offer something of value to what you're doing, but if what you're doing is well thought out and purposeful, and it means something to you, having an editor oftentimes will interject their own sort of, well, I think it'd be better if they went this direction instead of that direction, and go, well, is that really better for the story? Is it just because what you happen to for whatever reason, might want to see. And so sometimes it's hard to evaluate if you're getting good constructive story criticism as opposed to just getting someone's opinion about what they would do if they were writing it, which is not the same thing, right? I mean, if you write something, I might do it totally different than you would do it, but that doesn't invalidate what you did, right? You have to be able to look at a project or any movie or anything and say, okay, what was their intention here, and did they pull it off? You know, and they either did or they didn't. It doesn't matter if I would have done it differently, because I could have done it differently and been just as effective, right? So you got to look at the story and then say, okay, is this being done the best way that it can be done? And I feel I have I have a lot of experience. Obviously, I'm old, but I think I have a decent ability to step back from my own work and be pretty critical of it. And, you know, and I can feel when something's not hitting right, you know, like this scene is too long, or that scene's not long enough, or wow, I don't have enough action in this, and I have too much people sitting around talking. You have to and I think it's the same way about being an artist. You have to have the ability to step back from your work and have a really super critical eye of what you're doing, and be able to recognize when you suck and when you don't suck. And I think that's hard for some people. Some people it's not hard. I've been humiliated so much of my life crawling through this industry that I have a pretty low opinion of myself anyway. So I'm able to kind of step back and abuse myself pretty well. And of course, that doesn't mean everything I do is perfect, right? I mean, but as long as you have a clear vision of what you want to do, and then an understanding of, you know, enough understanding of dramatic structure, at least in comic book terms, I think you can do all right. And then it's more about hiring people to proofread your book. And I had multiple proofreaders, and I still had stuff slip through. It just pisses me off.
Yeah, trust me, it happens. It's amazing. Like Sean, who owns Merck Publishing, he will have things go through 3 or 4 proofreaders, and we'll get the books in the store, and I'll be like, you guys misspelled a word. You guys left 2 words in here. It's like it
comma
just
splice, other things. It's like, dang it.
Yeah, and you think, well, it's easy for you because you're the writer and you keep reading it over and over and over again. So whatever that mistake is, it sticks in your brain as being okay, and you don't see it. But then when you show it to other people and they still don't see it, it's like, and then of course someone points it out and you're like, how did I not see that? It's like this glaring thing right there. But
we've seen a lot worse in the mainstream. I'll say that. And
yeah, I suppose that's true. I never looked at my books when they were done, or I never read them, I should say, because I read the script before I would draw it. And then a lot of times I was unhappy with either the inking or the coloring. And so I would never look at it when it was finished, unless I knew I was going to get everything that I wanted, because I knew I'd just be disappointed or ticked off about something. So I didn't really ever proofread them that much. So
we got Aaron Louvier here. It says, agreed, Wraith of God is the best crowdfunded book I've gotten so far. That's including Kickstarter and Indiegogo books.
Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate that very much.
Which issue in his collection is Aaron's favorite?
In my entire comic collection?
That's what I'm assuming. Probably your personal collection?
I don't know.
Well, favorite read or favorite book? I have a God, that's a good one. I've got Avengers 4, which is the first Silver Age Captain America.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. I have a Golden Age book, National Comics number 26, that was produced by a company called Quality Comics in the 40s, and that was Eisner's studio. So it was Eisner, Lou Fine, Reed Crandall, really top-notch guys. And it's an Uncle Sam comic, and it's a white cover, and it's by Reed Crandall, and he's rolling up his sleeve, and you know, it's kind of a mid-shot up, kind of a classic cover, and his little sidekick buddy there is holding his hat as he's rolling up his sleeve, getting ready to fight the Nazi menace. And that's probably my favorite all-time book, because it took me, I saw it in the old Overstreet price guides. They have like galleries of covers, right, in the back of the book. And they would always have some Golden Age ones, some Silver Age ones. And I saw this in there in this Golden Age cover gallery. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. I'd love to have that. And it took me 30 some years to find it, just actually find a copy. And so the fact that it took me that long to find it and actually have one now, that would probably, if you had to pin me down and say, what's your favorite? That would probably be it.
Very nice. MG.
That's funny.
Yeah, I know. It's like, yeah, hey, we've been reading them. So
Oh,
yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah.
That's very true.
Yeah. Too many people sitting around talking? Nonsense. When's the Wraith of God gala? Yeah, like the Hellpower gala.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, there was a scene. I don't know how you guys want to, handle this, but I don't want to get ahead here. But there was a scene in Wraith of God where the sheriff comes and talks to Esther,
Mm-hmm.
and that was originally 2 pages. And the reason it was 2 pages was because I'm so hesitant because I know there's still people that haven't read it.
I know.
It's like, what should I say and what shouldn't I say? But I changed the ending a little bit because I felt like Esther needed to play a bigger part in the ending than she originally did. And that's what I'm talking about, kind of like being your own editor. You kind of step back and go, you know what? This isn't paying off like it should. And so I had this scene because let's just say this, the sheriff had a bigger role at the end. He still has a big role at the end, but it was a bigger role. Okay, for those of you who read the book, he pretty much did what Esther ended up doing in the original, right?
Yeah.
And I realized that I was like, now Esther's got to be the one that does this. She has to move forward. This has to be her scene, right? So originally there's a scene in there where the sheriff comes and talks to Esther, right? About midway through the book or so, up in the cave or the mine where they're hiding out. And it was a 2-page scene. And I realized, because I had rewritten the ending at this point, I was like, the stuff that was sort of important in that scene was no longer important in that scene. It was important that the sheriff and Esther met before the ending of the book, but not 2 pages important, right? So I cut that. After drawing both pages, I said, this is too long and it's not going anywhere. It doesn't need this. So I redid the page as a single page and then took that extra page and added it to the fight scene at the end, where the Wraith is fighting the werewolf at the end, because I thought, well, this is the big climactic battle, right? So that needs to be as many pages as possible. And so those are the kind of editorial decisions I made along the way while I was, putting the book together. And so I mean, that happen more than once. I mean, the starting of this book was extremely different. I had done an intro. I had done an intro, right, in like 1996, 97 when I first came up with it. And so there was an opening page, and then there was a double page splash where the Wraith is out in the desert at night, and there's this decayed body, laying in the desert, and his horse is reared up. It's a really cool image. And that's how I was going to open the book. And then it dawned on me, I said, well, if he, and how that was going to continue out, it was going to be in front of a stagecoach, like ticket, not a ticket office, but like a little station where a stagecoach would, pick up people or drop people off.
Yeah.
And so we have this dead body that was killed by a werewolf. Okay. And so it dawned on me, I said, well, wait a minute now. If he now knows that the werewolf is on the stagecoach, right, and there's more than one person on that stagecoach that goes into town, well, how would these other people, if they weren't the werewolf, right? Mm-hmm. And again, I'm being cryptic here. You guys know the answer to this question because you've read it, but in case they haven't, if there was just one werewolf in the stagecoach, right? and this guy had been killed by the werewolf, how would the people on the stagecoach not know that this guy was a werewolf if he left this dead body behind that he feasted on or whatever, right? So I was like, this is not going to work.
Mhm.
And then I thought, and I also realized that it was a slow way to start the book.
Mhm.
Okay, so I said, well, what if we have a gang of bad guys, which we did. We opened the story with this gang of bad guys who are werewolves headed to this town to find the amulet. And so we don't really need sort of the intro. We know that Wraith of God has been tracking them. We'll just assume that, as an assumption for the story. That's not really important. And so then he shows up and we're right into this opening 6 or 7 page action sequence where he's battling these guys who are werewolves. One gets away, right?
Yep.
And so then he knows to follow that guy that got away. And so I've basically done the same thing, got the Wraith a reason to go to this town because now he's tracking this guy that got away rather than finding this dead body on this trail of that would have been left by the stagecoach. And so now he, through his detective abilities, knows that the werewolf is probably on the stagecoach because that's the only way to get into the town. But he doesn't know who it is. And the people on the stagecoach wouldn't necessarily know who the werewolf was because he didn't kill anybody on the trip.
Yeah.
So I eliminated those problems. And again, those were editorial things where you write something and you think, oh, this is really cool. But then you have to step back and go, yeah, okay, this looks cool, but it doesn't make any sense. So I got to fix it. And that means tossing these really cool pages out that I had already drawn and do something different. So
but it was it was a well-made sacrifice you made. And yeah, the opening is fantastic.
Yes.
And, well, I mean, I'm a big fan, again, of movies. I feel that way. You don't want to slow roll into an adventure film. Yeah. And, like Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? We were right there in the middle of something, and then it kind of leads into where the story's going. And I'm a big fan of the old comics when you would open up the book and you flip the page, and the first page is Spider-Man swinging through New York or something, you're right. Let's start with Spider-Man and then find out about Peter Parker later. Let's not start with Peter Parker and slow roll into Spider-Man. I don't think that's an effective way to open up a superhero or adventure story. And so, I caught myself and fixed it. And I was much happier with the opening because it gets you right in. It gives you information you need and gets you right into the story. And then we can slow down for a little bit and set up some characters. And then we bring the Wraith back in later and that type of thing. So.
Yeah, and I will say I agree with you when it comes to opening a comic. You have that's your first impression outside of the cover. That's your first impression to grab the reader's attention. Those first pages or two, and right. You do that. You get it right away. And when it's completely opposite when you compare it to a Brian Michael Bendis comic, where as soon as you open it up, it's literally 30 to 50 word bubbles of you're being dialogue to death about what's going on in this issue and the previous issues. Like you've lost me. But it's perfect enticement to keep going in the book.
Right. You can't allow yourself to be so self-important and, every word I write is genius and everything I draw is wonderful that, you often see this in director's cuts, in films where they add back in scenes that are like, God, this just makes the scene drag more. Whoever edited this out the first time made the right decision. Sometimes you sacrifice clarity for pace too in movies, right?
Yeah.
I just went and saw Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan for like the 100th time in the theater with the director's cut, right?
Oh yeah.
And they cut back in all that stuff with Scotty's, yeah. And quite frankly, it's just annoying stuff. It gives a little bit more clarity of why Scotty's so broken up when the kid dies.
Yes.
But is that really all that important? Do I have to suffer through some of that ridiculous dialogue?
Or when Kirk is climbing the ladder with Spock, that kid, he's my son.
Yeah, I was like, oh my God. We know. Spock doesn't need to know right now that that's your kid, and Yeah, what did that kid say? He asked him what his name was. It was Peter Preston or something like that. And then in the part about cleaning the ship, and he's like, if the admiral can't see that for himself, well, then he's as blind as a Tiberian bat. And I'm like, no punk kid is going to say that to an admiral, Scotty's nephew or not, So it's just like, cut. I'm glad they cut it out. So.
Honestly, I think the only real director's cut, and we're veering off course, but my personal favorite director's cut of any film is the Aliens by James Cameron, because I feel like with that director's cut, you're getting more. That's when you get the drive from Ripley when she sees that her daughter had died, and when she was an old woman, and you really see her become more of a mother to the child that she finds.
I don't think I've seen that. I don't think I've seen the director's cut now that you say that, because that doesn't sound familiar. So like in the beginning of the film, there's like some allusion to her daughter or something?
Yes. Oh, yeah. So, well, here's what's funny. What's funny about this is that, so Aliens came out in 86. James Cameron came out with a director's cut in like, I think 1990, 89 on VHS, because he felt it was important for the story, and so did Sigourney Weaver. But it's out now. You can watch him on HBO. But yeah, there's a scene when Ripley is found. She is right before the big meeting with the Weyland-Yutani people. She's with Paul Reiser, and Paul Reiser says, "Here, this is." She asked him about her daughter, and he's like, "All right, here's your daughter. She died 20 years ago. She was 50 years old, 60." And you see Sigourney Weaver start crying. She said, I promised her I'd be back for her 8th birthday," and she just starts breaking down, tearing and crying. And when you get to later in the film, when she finds the kid, this is her chance to be a mother again.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that is. I mean, and it's, yeah, I mean, see, that to me, from what you're telling me, that makes a lot of sense,
Yeah, and that was cut.
It does get some weight. Yeah. Well, when I was in film school, they set us up with, I mean, you picked your own partners and team to work with. But then the staff would go behind. Well, they wouldn't necessarily go behind your back. They do it right in front of your face. But they would threaten people on your crew, because every director, like, for example, my junior year, we were doing a black and white film, right? And they said, okay, it can't be more than I can't remember what it was, 9 minutes long, I think, right? And so everybody, right, gets self-indulgent, and pretty soon your film is 15 minutes long, and they're like, no, you got to cut it. And you're like, no, you idiot, this is genius. What do you mean? If I cut out 6 minutes of this film, it's going to be ruined, and all this kind of stuff. And they would go to your partner and say, look, if you don't cut this film, you're going to get a lower grade in the class. So you're the guy that was the edit, and they would never let you edit your own film because they didn't want you to be self-indulgent. Right. And it was really kind of a valuable lesson, because I had about a 13-minute, 12-minute film. Ended up being a little bit over, but it was like 9.5 minutes or something. And the guy that edited it actually did a really nice job and cut some stuff out that it was nice to be in there, but it didn't really, you think in your mind, oh my gosh, this is so important. And then someone else looking at it that's not attached to it like you are, like, no, it really isn't. I can cut this right here and no one will know. And you're like, no, but you got to be able to, step back and do that to yourself, especially if you're not going to have a good editor working with you. And I don't know how many good editors are actually left in the industry, period. But
I do know at Merck Publishing, we got 2 of them. We have Aaron Sparrow. Aaron Sparrow's.
Oh yeah, Aaron's good. I like Aaron. I've known Aaron for years.
Yeah, I text Aaron because Aaron's looking over my book, Born of Blood. He's like, he's telling me I'm new. He's telling me, hey, you're getting better each time. So I know I can trust Aaron because he's legit. He knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, but I asked Aaron to get me a Star Trek II phaser.
Oh.
And, this is back when he was dealing in toys and stuff, and he was unable to do it. I had to get it myself.
Oh.
And I've never let him live that down. I'm like, you're the toy guy, and you can't even hook me up with, not get one for free, but just find one for me, right? And
I'll message him that right after we're done recording. I'll let him know.
I have been bugging about this. This is something I continue to hound him about, like 10 years after. And but you see, I did. But here's the thing: I found one myself.
Hey.
Like, dude, I'm not a toy guy, and I had to get this myself. You could not find this for me. But he's come up with Looney Tunes characters and stuff for me, which, but for some reason that Star Trek 2 phaser was his nemesis that he could not overcome. And I've never let him forget it.
Good. You shouldn't. Yeah. So, all right. So speaking of Wraith of God, so are you happy with the finished product? Is there anything that, looking back now, that you would change?
Well, I'd fix the one spelling error, obviously. But some of this seems kind of dumb to say, but I'm hypercritical of my artwork. I think there's some, when you're working on a deadline, and here's the dumb thing. This, even though creator-owned book and I'm total control of the project, this is my first project and I didn't want to be late, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And you're trying to project out months down the line, because this is 79 pages worth of story is in this book. So it's a long book. And you don't really, I penciled and inked myself. I've inked myself before, but usually just on covers, or I did a Batman story that I wrote penciled and inked, for DC, but it was not under any sort of deadline pressure. It was kind of whenever I got it done. So I didn't have a real clear idea in my mind exactly how long it would take me. How many pages can I do a week if I'm penciling and inking?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And you think going into it, you say, well, this is my magnum opus. I'm going to take as long time as I need. And, well, you really can't do that, because you still have customers waiting for this project, right? So you can't be too self-indulgent. So I didn't give myself enough time, basically is what I'm saying. So I was working 7 days a week for the last 4 months to get this done in April, when I, said I was going to get it done. And so there's a few pages I would go back and redo art-wise. I don't think there's anything egregious in there. But one thing we always used to tell ourselves when we were working for Marvel or DC, and you're on a deadline, right? You got to get the book done in 4 weeks or whatever the deadline may be. You don't have time to necessarily make every page a work of art, but what you do is you take the money pages that people are really going to linger on and make sure those kick butt, like the double page spread,
Yes.
It's in the middle of the book, right? Or, there was some other scenes in there that the pages were, really dramatic pages. And you're like, this has got, the werewolf standing over Henry Hull's body, that splash page, that's got to look cool. And so there's a few faces, there's a few pages that I felt like that could have been better. In terms of story, I had someone brought up something to me, and we started discussing it online, and I was like, we can't have this discussion because we're going to spoil it for people who haven't read it yet. So we went back and forth on DMs, and he had a good point. And I explained, my reasoning for why I did it, because the one thing you can count on in my books is that story-wise, there's not something in there I hadn't thought of. I made a decision, and it may have been the wrong decision, but it was a decision that I made knowing all the facts. And then I was like, I'm going to go this direction, and I think it's going to be okay, kind of thing. So he was kind of bringing it up like, you should have had an editor. It would have helped with this. And I'm like, well, I was the editor and I made this decision, and I know why I made the decision, and I explained to him why I made the decision, and he didn't accept it as legitimate. It wasn't contentious or anything. It was just kind of an open discussion because I really wanted to know what he thought. And, but I look back on it, and he had a point, but no one else has brought it up at all. And so it's kind of like, maybe I wasn't, maybe you can't please everybody. You know what I mean? Kind of thing.
Yeah. That's exactly it.
There's some things you guys critiqued about it that I gave away too much. And I would disagree with that. And you're the only guys who said that. Most of the people that have commented back to me they felt good. They really enjoyed the fact that I gave them so much information in this first outing. So they felt like they got a complete package, and I wasn't stringing them along unnecessarily. But I understand your criticism, and I understand why you said it. but again, that was a decision I sit there and make and say, well, how am I putting this package together? What do I want to do putting this package together that I think will please the most people? If it was a monthly book, I would have done it differently.
Okay.
Than what I did. As a graphic novel, I treated it like a screenplay. And I said, these people are going to the movies for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, whatever it is. And they need to walk away feeling like they saw a movie. It's not the end of the movie. I mean, there's more adventures to come, but I wanted enough of this explained so I didn't leave people hanging for months, years at a time, waiting to find out,
Honestly, I really truly felt you could have left all of us hanging. I really truly felt you could have left us hanging.
Same. After going through it again, we're looking there. It's like, man, it's that double-edged sword. It's like, well, is it nice having all of it in here? 100%. Like anybody could pick this up. We could tell anybody, pick up Wraith of God book 1. You're going to find out everything you're going to need to know, as opposed to here's 5 books you need to read, and then you'll get the full story.
But you guys have to admit that there is some ambiguity, especially surrounding his origin story. That
yes, there are certain elements where it's like some may we don't know what we don't know if like this did happen, did this not happen? I don't know. But there's stuff that happened before the story that he just alludes to, because if you remember, the Talbot's wife asks him in the room, she goes, where did you learn all this stuff? And he just makes a quick allusion to a ancient Chinese mystic or something that he learned this stuff from, earlier in his youth. And then we never touch on that again. No.
That's an important, so there's things that haven't been shown yet. And things like the horse. I didn't explain the horse.
I just picked that up this time. I'm like, wait a second, that wasn't. I'm like, how did this happen? I just picked that up right now.
See, so I felt like I gave people enough background, and I understand what you're saying, because the longer you leave him a mystery, the more compelling it can be.
Yes.
But my fear was that the distance between this project and the next project, I feel you run a risk of dangling people too long, and then they get irritated and lose interest, right? And so that was my fear. And again, this was originally a 4-issue miniseries. I mean, I was this close to doing it at DC. And so if this had been spread out over 4-issue miniseries, you guys might have been okay with it, right? So the story doesn't really change. It's just how it's packaged.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And so, and I understand you guys sitting there going, oh my gosh, I just invested whatever it takes to, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, however long it takes to read the book. And you're like, well, now I know everything. Well, you know a lot, but you don't know everything.
Yes, that's true. Yes. Yeah.
Story of my life.
I was also relying heavily on the fact that the epilogue, I think, is really tantalizing.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
That is completely, people are guessing at this point, and that's not going to get paid off until this runs its course. I'll continue to drop hints, but
yeah,
and I was
kind of as long as you want. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, so that to me, for me personally, that was kind of the teaser that sort of kept this going. It's not so much because at some point people are going to get tired of a Western, right? At some point you have to be able to integrate these characters into a contemporary setting that your other characters exist in, right? Correct. Otherwise it's like the Silver Surfer. The Silver Surfer has always struggled with popularity because he's always out there where the rest of the world is right here. And so he's off doing stuff in space, and that's okay, but we don't really know anything about this alien race. We're not invested in this alien race. We're invested in humanity on Earth. And so the Silver Surfer, although he's extremely cool, always felt disconnected. And so there was always sort of a struggle to make his series as popular as the character should be because of how cool he is. And Warlock the same way, Captain Marvel was the same way. Cool characters, but they're detached from the rest of the Marvel universe because they're off in space doing something someplace else instead of integrating effectively with the rest of the universe. And so that was a concern of mine. It's like, I wasn't so concerned with the mysteries of who he is and what he's doing in the Old West, but how does this tie in with where I'm going? That's the mystery for me. And what I hope I left with the readers a little bit. And again, there is some mystery still involved with his origin that, we're still not sure, is he operating with the power of God, or is this just all the guy's nut job and he's a magician? What do we, I mean, he clearly believes he's doing this, or at least we think he believes he's doing it, but what's the real story? And that's the stuff we will find out. So it's kind of finding that balance between giving your readership enough information so they feel satisfied for what they just invested in, and leaving enough mystery so you can keep them coming back for more. And that's, like you said, you guys have legitimate criticisms, but it's a choice I made for those reasons.
Yeah, and it's still a great book. It is absolutely still.
Yeah, it's still one of the best.
Yeah, like we said, yeah, we clear. I mean, yeah, it is still, the best.
It's
right now, king of the mountain right now.
Yeah.
So I feel like another thing you do really well is your cast of characters that you have. It's not just Wraith of God. It's not just him and nobody else, because then you could easily lose interest. It's everything else that town felt so lived in. You introduced to the sheriff, who's this.
I love the sheriff. I love that.
I love that character and his troubled past. It's like there's so much to unpack here, and I just absolutely fell in love with everything. It felt lived in, which is amazing.
Well, one of the things they brought to this particular project, and it's going to be the difficult thing going forward, because again, this was, to me, the graphic novel is would be separate than the ongoing series in a way, right? So it's a bigger production in terms of story. Again, it's an 80-page story. But I had the mystery elements of, who's the werewolf? Mm-hmm. And I really felt like that would give readers something else to occupy their time. In other words, like you said, it wasn't just a straight, I'm going to go there and kill the werewolves and we win. He has to find out who the werewolves are. He has to find out, and we still don't know what the sheriff's deal is, but
no, I love that. That's a great mystery right there too. I love that.
We haven't seen the last of him. Okay.
Nice. Love it.
And so those were fun things, and those were difficult things too, because I remember reading about The Sixth Sense, right?
Yeah.
And of course, the big reveal, spoiler alert, plug your ears, that Bruce Willis is dead, right? I mean, that's the big payoff. And the difficult thing, and I had read some people's commentary that not M. Night Shyamalan, because the guy's an egomaniac, but so he didn't think he can do anything wrong. But other people associated with the film were a little concerned that there were certain shots in the film or certain scenes that were going to give it away before he wanted to give it away.
Absolutely.
It didn't happen, right? Everybody was totally shocked because you didn't want to, it didn't even occur to you to think that way.
Yeah, it's because he was you have to pay that close attention to detail, because one wrong scene, one wrong move, hands in the wrong place, you've given it away.
And so I was scared to death that I would have so many people going, oh, I knew it was him the whole time. Oh, I knew that was going to play out that way, but no one said that. So I think that for the most part, I think people didn't figure it out until they were supposed to figure it out. I mean, I hope.
Yeah.
The mystery part of it. I mean, not, necessarily the origins of the Wraith or Esther or things like that. But, and I felt like I had to show the Esther origin, which doesn't really give away much. Until until we get the full reveal at the end of the story.
Correct.
But I felt we had to I couldn't just have this sort of confused or woman who was doubting her direction in life and if she made right choices, unless we found out how she got in those circumstances to begin with. Because your automatic response would be, well, if she's not happy, why doesn't she just leave?
Yeah.
Yep.
right? And so I felt like I had to set up and show why.
Motivation, get that motivation established to why they do what
right.
They do.
And so I was juggling a lot of things, and when you're doing something like that, it's like when you're writing a comedy, you're like, I hope this is funny, and it's like you're doing a mystery, you go, I hope this really is a mystery, and I'm not giving anything away, or I'm making it too easy to figure out, or I'm think I'm being clever when I'm being obvious, kind of stuff. But I don't think, so I purposely set up certain things to lead you down a certain path, right? Like you have the one guy escaping at the end, right? So what are you focused on? You're focused on that one guy, or the one person that gets away at the very beginning of the story that's a werewolf, right? So that it's a little bit of misdirection to what's going on in the story. So I get you thinking, okay, well, we're looking for this singular person that does this, and that's got to be, and then you find out that maybe that's not what it's all about, at the end. So I tried to do that, to set it up so that everything that might be too obvious wasn't as obvious.
That's fair.
And that's trouble. That's there's potential problems, and it's problematic. I'm thankful to say that the new story doesn't have those mystery elements in it. It still has there's still some moral issues, because I always like to base my stories on some moral structure, right? That so your characters can learn something and grow from the experience, right?
Yes.
And so I have that same, I have that as an underlying current in this story, as well as we still have a contentious relationship between the Wraith and Esther that is far from being resolved. They've taken a step, but there's a long road ahead for that. And so those are the elements that are, to me, are more the meat of this story. I'm not saying it's boring, because it isn't. There's more action in this vampire story than there was in the werewolf story. But it's not it's not like a mystery story trying to figure out, who's who or whatever. It's a different kind of story in that regard. But then I just couldn't go out and do the same thing over again anyway, right? Because then it becomes trite and
correct.
Well, we just read this. This is the first story with vampires in it. So
that's fair. Yeah, I think looking back, I think one of the things that we kind of agreed on, it's the Esther backstory is great, like that scene. But then if you just get rid of that 5 years earlier stuff, if you just take that out to where you see the backstory with the guy at the circus and everything, it's like if you get rid of that stuff, I mean, you
save it for another day. Is what you're saying.
Create more of a mystery of that, because then
I would have had this at, like, honestly, I would have probably made it like a 9.5, 9.0. Honestly.
Yeah. But that's just our opinion.
Yeah.
That's not to say that we're right and everyone else is wrong.
No, I think it's a legitimate argument, but all I can do is, like I said earlier, is just to give you the justification of why I did it.
Yeah,
right?
And
it makes
everything
sense.
you said, it makes sense.
Makes perfect sense.
But I can understand and if I had, and that's the thing, and we talked about this over Facebook, that you don't know if you're going to get a second issue, right? You don't know.
Yes.
And so it's like, I've done that before, right? Like with Power Cubed, I released the first issue through Image Comics way back in 2000, and it sold okay. And then the second issue was a complete tank job, right? The orders didn't come in for it, so I had to cancel it. So now I got people hanging. It literally took me 10 years before I was able to do it as a miniseries at Dark Horse and then get it in the trade paperback. And I felt terrible doing that. And it's kind of like, I just felt like, from just a responsibility standpoint, that I needed to give everybody enough that if this was it, let's say, because if this hadn't funded to the degree it would have, I still would have done the book, even if I lost money, because I promised I would, and I'm good to my word. And I would have put it out, and that would have been it. We never would have seen Wraith of God again, right? And then then I got people going, oh, I wish I could have seen more. What happened here? What happened? I mean, there's still more to be revealed, obviously, but I wanted to make sure, again, that there was enough stuff there that people wouldn't feel like I gypped them. And so I gave more than you guys would have, or sooner than what you guys would have liked. But for me, I gave what I felt I needed to do to cover my bases, but still not give everything away. So,
yeah. And you've not given everything away. So that's great. And I love the mystery of what we got left. It's great.
It's like there is a fine line between how this story went and how Ethan chooses to do Cyberfrog, because those cliffhangers, dear God, I mean, it is. I mean, it's literally like
a DC crisis event.
It would be like the werewolf showing up in your double splash page, and that's the end. And it's like, are you kidding me? Like,
well, and we actually discussed this on Comicsgate Kings. I think that it might have been the stream you guys popped in on. I don't know if it was both of you were there, but one of you was there, and we were actually having this conversation. At least I was one-sidedly in the. And I remember someone in the chat going, "Aaron, why can't you just take a good review and let it go? Why?" No, I gotta address these issues. But we had, Ethan and I went back and forth because he was like, "Oh, I love cliffhangers," and I'm like, "Yeah, that's fine if I know it's coming out in 30 days,
right?
And you can resolve it and move on, kind of thing." But I think it's pretty. Again, it's a matter of opinion, right? Who knows what your audience will put up with until they don't put up with it anymore, right? Yeah. So. He's had quite a bit of distance between the first Cyberfrog and the second Cyberfrog.
Yeah.
And it's a long time to leave somebody hanging on something like that, I felt.
Yeah.
And again, my project, I don't know how many pages was Cyberfrog. I don't think it was as big.
Which, the first one or the second one?
Is this, wait a minute.
The most recent one he did? I previewed for him? The Wreck Planet?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was 70 I think 72
something.
Pages, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was about the same size as mine.
Yes.
But I tend to, my background in writing is script writing. And I mean, education wise, right? I don't have any movie credits, so don't get excited. But that was my, I went to film school, and that's structurally how I approach things, and always have. I don't approach like if someone said, "Aaron, take over Spider-Man," as a writer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I just, that's not how I think. It's like, what can I fill in for this 30 page or 20 page stories for this 30 days, and then next month I'll come up with something else, and we'll just kind of keep stringing the soap opera stuff along. I mean, I got to know where I'm going and how it's going to turn out, and so I'm always working towards that end, telling a finite story, whether that's maybe 4 or 5 issues of Wraith of God before I wrap it up, or whatever that may be. I know where I'm going. And that's kind of how I approached this first graphic novel, was kind of a finite sort of story that I wanted to tell. Again, like a miniseries might be, as opposed to just an open-ended ongoing series. So we look at things differently, Ethan and I do. And like I said, it's just it depends on what you like, right? It's Chevy or Ford.
And I like both. So it's nice I can get both.
So if you don't want your stories explained, you guys can read Ethan. If you want your stories explained, you can read me.
Boom, there it is. When in doubt, get both.
Yeah,
so.
Right.
Richard Gifford, Wraith is nothing short of amazing. Most excited I have been about a comic character in years.
Thank you, Rich. Richard came late. I missed the campaign, and he's been buying the back issue. Well, it's funny to refer to them as back issues already, right? From me, and he was really excited, and he's pushing the campaign a lot and actually telling people, "You got to read this." So I'm quite grateful for his enthusiasm and promotion of the project.
Yeah, and that's what we're doing too. When we tell them about this book. Aaron Louvier, I hope I said that right.
Louvier.
Yeah, Louvier. Any chance you're going to let us buy 11 by 17 prints of the covers this time?
No. Well, there's a very specific reason, and you guys know this. It's like when you're packaging this stuff together, if it's all different sizes, it makes it almost impossible to package. I had, in the last campaign, I had my hardcover sketchbook, which was part of one of the tiers or the perks. And that screwed me up totally because it was so much bigger than everything else. So I had to get different boxes for those specific things. And it was kind of a pain in the butt. So I'm not doing any prints because any large size prints would have to be either folded, which you don't want, or rolled and put in a poster tube.
Yes.
And that just kind of tosses your whole shipping savings out the window, right? Yes. But I will say this, I am going to do this. I am going to do a print campaign, maybe like the first of the year, right? So this campaign will still be running in demand, but I'm going to open up a print campaign that's going to feature the Dale Keown Bloody Werewolf poster as a blacklight poster.
Oh,
24 by 36.
Oh, man.
And then there will be a Kit Carter. Those of you familiar with movie poster stuff, insert posters were the 14 by 36, where they're long and narrow.
Yep. Yeah.
So, because Kit Carter, the whole thing with Kit Carter is that she's kind of a 50s sci-fi serial type character. So I'm going to do a faux movie poster, 14 by 36, and that'll be part of the campaign. And then there will be a couple of smaller prints. Maybe like you're talking about, I could make prints available to some of these covers as 11 by 17s. And that way, if you back everything, I can roll them all up together and stick them in a tube. And they're on their way to you. And so rather than putting big posters, I mean, it's difficult enough I put T-shirts in this campaign because I can't ship them with the books. They're going to ship separately.
Yeah.
And same with the shot glasses and the baseball caps. Those are all shipped separately. But they're not big enough items to do their own campaign for, right? So they're add-ons in this one, but they will ship separately. But the posters, I thought, no, if I do that, it's going to be as a separate thing. So I can, if everybody gets all the prints, they can all slide right into a poster tube and mail them out that way. So,
I like it. So have you considered doing an eBay store like Ethan does?
Yeah. Well, what I have that Ethan doesn't have, and I don't understand why, is my own website. It's being in the process of redoing it. So anybody that goes there, it's not anywhere near up to date. But I'm going to try and make that the hub for selling my stuff as opposed to eBay, because eBay, their fees are just too freaking high anymore.
Oh yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. It really is annoying. And so I'm going to try and make the stuff available on my website, whether that's the extra copies of this book or the prints and the posters, those type of things. Once I get it redone, which I've been it's been put on the back burner because I've been, working on this campaign. But I got to get my web guys working on that. And so we'll see if I can generate any business just off my website, so I don't have to deal with eBay stores and stuff. But if I can't, then I'll drop some on eBay, because I have a ton of sticker sets and trading cards left over that were the stretch goals that I'm putting in little packets, that people can get for like $10 or whatever if they didn't get them or want to get them or want extra sets or whatever. So there will be little things and the T-shirts. We always overprint on the T-shirts, so you got extra T-shirts. So those will be up on the website, that type of thing. So I have my own store that's a little bit more under my control. Whether I get the traffic or not will be, another issue, but we'll see how it goes.
So I love action figures, and I don't know if anyone's told you yet, but all of your characters, from Garbage Man to the Wraith to the vampire here to the werewolves, they all look like they would be outstanding action figures. Is there any talk about this yet at all?
Monsters always make the best action figures, don't they?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
And toys. And
Garbage Man, I would love a Garbage Man action figure, honestly.
That would be so cool.
yeah, right?
I think just watching Ethan go through what he's doing, and the amount of money he had to raise, what did he raise? Like $650,000. And that really, he's not lying. That's break even money.
Yes.
It's an expensive proposition. So unless somebody came to me, like Mattel or whatever and said, we see this is really popular. We'd like to make some action figures out of it. And they're going to absorb all the cost and everything. It's not really possible. What I am looking at, however, is the static figures that aren't articulated, like little statues or whatever, are much more doable. And that's a very real possibility.
Ooh, outstanding.
Yeah, like that. Yeah, kind of like he did with the PVC.
Right.
Little guy. Yeah.
Yeah. So he has stuff like that you can't necessarily, play with. But how many of us really at this age are doing like fighting? It's
going into the tub.
Yeah, we pose them and we put them up on our shelf, right? And they become like a statue. Yeah. So I would love to do like a big diorama statue of Wraith of God and a horse and everything. Like it would be really, really cool, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But something like that's a pretty high ticket item, and you're only going to have to sell probably, 100 or so at, probably be like what, $500 or something.
I will say, for example, with Sean and Jamie Tyndall work together, and Jamie Tyndall, they just released a statue of Catfight, and they're charging $1,000 per statue. And fortunately, he has the backers aligned for it who will pay for it, and they've paid for themselves at this point. But
I think statues, you don't sell a lot of them, but
no,
but there's enough high ticket people out there that are statue people that you could probably make it work.
Absolutely.
But I get really excited about this stuff, and it's easy to sit there and go, wouldn't it be cool if we did this, and let's do that, and let's do that. And I have to kind of pull back and say, let's not put the cart in front of the horse here, because I want to make sure that I've solidified a fan base for Wraith of God before I do something that potentially could bankrupt me.
That's fair.
That's fair.
100%.
But I'm, at least you are aware. I mean, we're saying, just because, I mean, like I said, looking at all the other characters, they're fine. They're okay. It's like Cyberfrog is great. Like your characters, like these are flipping action figures right here, waiting to be statues.
They are.
Yeah.
I agree. They're built to be that kind of thing, to be merchandised. And again, it's because I think there's two things when you're designing a character that you want something to feel iconic, whether it is or not. I mean, time takes care of making it iconic or not, but you want it to feel that way. Like, man, I feel like I've seen that before, or I feel like, it's something that is recognizable, even if you've never seen it before. Like the design for Predator, right? It's instantly iconic. Okay, you take all the monster trolls from Lord of the Rings. They're just ugly people. They don't mean anything. There's nothing you can really grab onto. It's just he took a bunch of artists and said, draw me the most ugly thing you can come up with. And I'm not saying it doesn't work for the movie, but if you're trying to create action figures or even a character that exists beyond the movie, they don't really work in that regard, because there's nothing in their design that you can really grab onto except just ugliness for ugliness' sake. Maybe the one lead orc in the original movies kind of felt like he was a character. You know what I mean?
Right.
But you look at Predator, and it's such a great design that's got toy written all over it, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So
or Xenomorph. Xenomorph is another one.
Xenomorphs, yeah.
One of the Colonial Marines, like any of just like the weapons they're packing, they look great with the armor and everything.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got stuff that's built in when you designs, and that's kind of what I was doing with these characters to kind of make them feel that way, right? I always felt like, I know there's guys that'll really they really go out there and they say, I got to do something different, because if I do something totally unique, it'll get someone's attention. And there's truth to that. But there's also like comfort food, where there's an established audience for a type of thing. And if you can bring that to them and it's in their comfort zone, it's new, but it's recognizable, right?
Yep.
Like you have people look at Wraith and go, oh, he's kind of like Zorro, or he's kind of like the Ghost Rider, he's kind of like this, he's kind of like that. He is kind of like all those things, but then he's still himself.
Yes.
So I feel like it's easier to get a broader audience for something that they feel comfortable with. And Garbage Man is like Swamp Thing, but he's not Swamp Thing. He's like Sludge, but he's not Sludge. You know what I mean? And so there's stuff that's come before it that sort of set the table for these characters, and you can go in and access that audience, I think, immediately because of that familiarity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And hopefully that then translates into sales, and if you do merchandise, and it works the same way. So
yep. So yeah, I for one want 11 by 17 of that Tomb of Dracula #1, and I would love, like, see for me, like, I'm an art guy. If you sell those 11 by 17 at your booth when you go to cons and you do remarks on them, I mean,
like a little vampire head remark on the corner,
yeah, or Wraith of God remark up there. I mean, hands down, you could sell that for $100 all day long, and I'd buy it in a heartbeat.
Well, it's interesting that. Well, thank you. I didn't. Anytime you do something right, you don't really know what the response is going to be. The response to this cover has been really, really positive, and and I looked at the Tales of Suspense cover, and I knew, because it doesn't have Wraith on it, really. I mean, it has this little headshot in there, but it's really a cover about the supporting characters, and it's a cover about nostalgia.
Yes.
So this is the least selling cover of the 3, which I expected it to be. But I think it's still different enough that you're a completist, you'd want it, or if you're old school like me, you get what I'm doing, and you're like, oh, I got to have that. Because I really like it. I like the color. I like everything about it. But I understand why it's the third. I mean, one cover is always going to be the third most. If you do 3 covers, one of them is always going to be the least popular, right?
Yes.
Esther was the least popular of the last. Even though it's still, I think I really like that cover, but I didn't know that I wasn't sure about the Tomb of Dracula. Was that going to work or not? But everybody seems to really dig that. So I just haven't had time to kind of assess the artwork and go, well, I can make a print out of that, and I can make a print out of this, and but I will as soon as I get caught up. But that's the kind of feedback I need, and people to tell me if they want to see something, hey, think about doing this or think about doing that. I got people bugging me to do an entire deck of playing cards now because we did the Ace of Spades with the first campaign, and on this one, when we get to 120,000, there'll be an Esther Queen of Hearts playing card, right? That kind of goes with the Ace of Spades. But then people going, hey, do a whole deck. Wouldn't that be cool? And I'm like, that would be cool.
Yeah.
So.
And I think you said you might be doing a 24-hour variant, right?
Well, I definitely am. It's just when I'm going to do it. I just contacted the artist again. Said, dude, how close are we? And he said, I'll have it for you next week. And he's told me that 4 times now. But so maybe this will, he's starting to feel guilty. So maybe this coming week will be the week.
So, Eric, real quick question: Did the original art for one of these covers sell for $75?
No, I'm not sure what they're referring to.
Okay, I was like getting ready to say, like, whoa, what the?
I don't think you would allow that.
Yes.
I'm not that. I may be the Kmart of original art, but I'm not that.
I mean, I sold 2 of your original pieces for 120 each, that Ghost Rider and the Throg, and I feel like I got a hell of a deal. So, so with the 24-hour variant, would you consider maybe doing like a head sketch in there for an additional charge?
Some guys put down like sketches as a perk.
Yeah.
I hesitate to do that because I spend so much time when I actually get into working mode and producing the book. It's like, I don't even want to think about, now I got to do a, 50 or even 20, sketches. You're like, geez, even if you're getting paid for it, it's just kind of, it distracts me from I tend to be I tend to compartmentalize a lot, and it's like, I've got to get this done before I can do this. Me working on multiple things at the same time, I just feel overwhelmed, and then I don't do anything. It's like paralysis to analysis or whatever. So it's like, if I know I'm doing this, and when this is done, I'm going to move to this, and then when that is done, I'm going to move to this, and I'm 100% in on this, and this while I'm working on it. It's easier for me to function. So So to answer your question, probably not. And the other thing is, I don't want to. I'm always scared about drawing in a book. I'm always scared about bending the cover or something, right? If you're drawing like on the inside, like remarking or something. I mean, you can remark it on the cover, but I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't do it, but it's nothing I would make a decision on until if I felt like this campaign isn't performing the way I need it to. Maybe I need to add this to bring in a little bit more cash or whatever. I would be more likely to consider it, but everything is always taken under advisement.
That's fair. Keep it open. I'm just because of all the stuff we do here at Comics Elite.
Yes.
I'm just like, okay, I know people paid big money for this stuff, and this stuff, myself included. I'm just thinking like, oh, that would be a bad idea. So this is just stuff I'll just have you do it when I meet you in person. Then.
Well, the one thing that kind of threw a curve at me, which I wasn't expecting, was I did all the book covers in matte finish because I prefer that to the gloss.
Yep.
One, because I don't like the reflectivity, and two, it fingerprints so horribly, especially on a dark cover. And so I went with a matte finish, which I prefer 100 times more. But what I found out was those matte covers don't take ink very well. So you have to find, I mean, I destroyed a couple of covers just trying to find a pen that would sign on them. And what I found was that what worked really well were the Sharpies, the colored ones, like the gold and the silver, but they got to be wet, right? If they're even slightly, that's a silver, right?
Yep.
If they're even slightly used, they don't work. It's got to be just filled with ink, and then you don't push very, very hard, and the ink it flows nicely over it. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't just be able to take a black pen and draw on them because it doesn't take ink very well. It's really bizarre. Or at least, I mean, maybe like a ballpoint pen or something it would, but the markers, it doesn't. It's very interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so Wraith of God 2. Let's talk about that. So what?
Yes.
Without giving too much away, what can we expect from this that's different from the first Wraith of God?
Well, you can expect the relationship issue between Wraith and Esther to pick up where it left off, or where you might expect it would be based on the things that she said to him, and then also the things that she said to us, the reader, that he didn't hear. So there's still obviously they're working together, but there's still tension and things that need to be resolved there. So we're going to address that. And actually, one of her issues becomes a huge factor in how the story plays out with the vampire. There's going to be. Let me see. How would I? The way this is set up is I don't think the Wraith would function very well. I mean, he might in a certain situation, like if you went in 1883, if you went to Boston, for example, right? That's a very different city than someplace out in Phoenix or around, Arizona, right? In the middle of or New Mexico or someplace, right?
Yes.
Or in this case, Tennessee. So a lot of his stuff, and it might be interesting to kind of look at him in a big city situation like Boston or something, where he would become more like Batman, where everybody would see him. So you'd have to be really careful. He'd be jumping around on rooftops more than he'd be walking around on the street, right?
Right.
And, getting away from authorities and those type of things. That might be an interesting thing that I'll look at. But this is going to be in a not quite a isolated town as Calamity was in the first story, because the vampire is preying on the people in this town, and there's only like 100 people in the town. It won't take long before it's a town of vampires and nothing else, right? So,
Right.
And we see the Undertaker, which if you scroll down to the interior pages, this guy right there with the top hat, yeah. He's sort of the vampire's Renfield, and
Okay.
this is a guy that I actually created him to be a host of a House of Mystery comic I was going to do called the Tome of Terror, and I might still do that. But then I was like, oh, I could use him in this story, and I could still use him for the host of this horror comic, and it wouldn't really matter, right? Because it's sort of a, and so vampires, of course, have, much like the werewolves, right? The werewolf can only operate on the full moon, right? And so they're sort of limited. The vampire, of course, comes out every night, but he's still during the day, he can't. So, that's why they have the Renfield character, or the person that kind of takes care of business during the day. So this is kind of the story is, well, the Wraith is dealing with more than one adversary in a lot of ways. And then you've got the brides, which I've already, basically, told you we're going to be in it. So this, and when I wrote the script, and I have a friend of mine that I bounce story ideas off. He's actually a musician, really good. But when we were younger, we used to co-write stuff together all the time. And so he has really good ideas, and I can throw out something to him and say, okay, this happens, but I'm stuck about how to get from here to here. And then he'll say, well, what if you do this? And then I'll say, no, but what if you do that? And he says, well, no, what if you do? And so then eventually I find my way through the traffic. And we had this, I guess, a story session where I sat down and bounced some ideas off of him, told him what my problems were with this, that I had to get around in the story. And we came up with this thing, and it really, to be honest with you, from beginning to end, it feels kind of like a Hammer film. So, which I kind of dig. I mean, I like the old monster, the vampire Hammer films and stuff like that.
Yeah, great.
It definitely has that story has that feel to it, especially the climactic scene. So it's a little bit different. Where the Wraith of God graphic novel, in a lot of ways, was a mystery story as well as it was an adventure story. This is more. It'll feel more like a Hammer horror film, I think, to those people that are familiar with that genre. So it's fun in a different way, and I think it's interesting to see. Let's see, the arrival by ship and hauling of the coffin interviews seem like the Old West equivalent scenes from the '70s AIP vampire. See, there you go.
There you go.
That's exactly it. The American International or Hammer, whatever.
Yeah. Just missing Peter Cushing. That's all we're missing right here.
Right, exactly. So it's interesting, I think, to see the Wraith, like Batman. Sometimes Batman will use his detective skills. Sometimes he'll just beat the crap out of somebody, right? And I felt like he used more of his detective skills in the first one, and we're going to get more beating the crap out of somebody.
Hey,
yeah, cool.
I'm all for that.
In this one, but I really like the moral of this story a lot. This one I'm doing, kind of the payoff, the emotional payoff of it, and what do I get out of this beyond just the take me on a ride for 30 minutes or whatever. What am I getting out of this? What do I take away from it? And I like the takeaway from this a lot. My feeling is on the graphic novel, the first one, that it's you're setting up stuff and you're telling a story, but you're also setting up the characters and their relationship and things like that. To me, that's just a starting point, right? And so I get to explore that a little bit deeper. And the fact that I had a really clear idea of what I wanted, the purpose of the story, the underlying purpose of this story. What do the Wraith and Esther take out of this? To me, that's the payoff beyond just the payoff of the story, which is obviously going to have an ending. And, does the vampire die? Does he get away? Those type of things. But then there's more that those two characters are going to take with them to the next adventure, right? that to me is the emotional payoff, I guess, of the story. And what I got planned here, I'm really satisfied with. So I'm excited to do a better job, right? I'm excited from the art standpoint to do, like I said, there's some pages in the graphic novel are like, those could have been better. I want to see if I can make less of those pages in this one. So I'm excited on a lot of levels. It's just there's such a burden when you do a, like Spider-Man's origin story. It's much easier after you've established all that world building, right? And then you can come in and bring in Doc Ock and have some fun with the Green Goblin and stuff. And you don't have to be worried so much about setting everything up correctly, because now it's set up. And so now you've set up your world. Now let's go play in it a little bit. So I think it'll have more of that kind of a feel to it. It'll feel like a second issue, where you've got your backstory, you've got your stuff established, you kind of know who the characters are, and now let's go forward and see where they end up.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing I really like is your paneling. Just the way it progresses the story, and it just the different types of paneling you have, like even going back to Wraith of God. It was funny, we were bringing this up yesterday live. Midnight Suns, current Marvel book, and the old 90s,
the old 1990s, which I have. Which I have with
Midnight Suns. It's night and day. Like Marvel paneling is so right now boring.
Yeah, Joe Kubert, Andy and Adam Kubert working on Ghost Rider.
Right.
Yeah.
Does that, I saw when you were doing these pages live, and just your thought process of, you know what, I could do this the opposite way, and I'm going to change the whole thing up and change the dynamics of everything. I just absolutely love that.
Well, when you start monkeying around like I did with these diagonal panels here, there has to be a flow to it, right? And I had it. I believe what you're saying, and if I remember correctly, I had these go in the opposite direction, right?
Yep.
So this dude's head was over here.
Yes.
Yep.
And I wanted it to kind of swing, like it does now, down to the bottom of the page. And so I think this works much better. And the reason I did this the way I did it was I feel like it gives a little bit of movement. You're lowering this casket off the ship, and I wanted to kind of create a little feeling of that sort of movement and progression in that scene, so it wasn't just some static images,
Mm-hmm. And I get that 100%. I feel it. That's just swinging of the casket going down. It's like it's so dynamic. And in fact, it's like it doesn't. There's not much going on. It's just a lowering of a casket, but with that, it feels menacing and important.
Yeah, and thank you. And what you try to do, I think, is we're dealing with still images here, right? So you have to create the best you can, some sort of movement in the imagery without it becoming distracting. And that's always a very delicate balance, But I think I achieved the goal here, and I'm really, really pleased with this page. I'm actually really pleased with the first 3 pages, which is, I remember after doing the splash page in the first graphic novel of the Wraith up on the rocks, right, when he first shows himself, I almost redrew that because I was like, this isn't as cool as it could be, kind of thing. And I don't. Everybody was like, "Are you crazy? It's fine, leave it alone," And I did, of course, I left it alone, but
yeah.
But I don't have that feeling with. I got exactly out of these pages what I wanted to get out of them, which I think is a victory. When that happens, when you can look at the page and go, hey,
I completely agree, because what Kyle said, when we're reading a current, like, say, Marvel, DC book, it's very paint by numbers. You're following the panels, very boring. But some, like a book like yours, or like we said, brought up Midnight Suns from the 90s, you're an actively engaged reader. Your eyes are the pages are kinetic. They're in motion. You're following the story along with the art. It's great. It's like you, and the other one recently is Dana Warren Johnson, with this series do a power bomb. Very much the same way. The panels are in motion. It's very kinetic, and you're actively engaged. It's beautiful. It's hard to do anymore, for what I've seen.
Well, thank you. I know, I appreciate it. And I think it's just because a lot of people in comics now, they may be very good illustrators, but they're not necessarily comic book fans. So they don't have a complete understanding of the medium and how it works and how to effectively use it, as they used to, and it just cracks me up. We would constantly, I'm not going to say constantly, but occasionally we're getting, you guys see, the Twitter stuff where they'll call comic skaters, or especially those old pros like me, in other words, has-beens, and guys that they couldn't work in the mainstream, and then we go out and do stuff like this to essentially. I'm not doing this to prove anybody wrong, but I think it does prove people wrong that there's still a lot of life left in us.
Yeah, and absolutely. And like we go off according to our scale. Pretty much a 6.0 and above is like anything at 6.0 and above is a recommend. The 5.5 and below, meh, and a skip it. Really, almost like only 3 of them are mehs and skip it. Everyone else has managed to produce a solid comic.
Yeah.
And that's a remarkable thing, considering, how often that doesn't happen in the mainstream.
Exactly. On a weekly basis. This past week, we read them. We read every single new book every single week. And yeah, this past week we had more skippets and mehs than recommends. And just a lot of these creators in the mainstream, it's just paint by numbers. Let's just crank out the next one. It doesn't matter. And there's really no creativity there.
Well, you got to think after a while, what can you do with Spider-Man that hasn't been done 100 times? I guess make him gay or change him into a woman. I mean, that's what's left. But so we have the opportunity here independently to kind of, these are new characters, right? These are stuff that no one's seen before. So you can breathe some life into this and do some things that people haven't seen before, at least not with your character. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun, I guess, really, but it's how you present it. And so we have an advantage in terms of being able to be creative, and we don't have a corporate plan or some editorial influence driving us in a particular direction that maybe we don't want to go. And that always happened in mainstream. When I wrote stuff for DC, I usually pitched projects that were characters that no one cared about, because I figured I'd get the least interference.
That's fair.
Well, you also got the least amount of sales. But like, I did a Metamorpho miniseries, right? That I wrote and drew, and I had this what I thought was pretty ingenious take on Metamorpho, and Dan DiDio came to me and he said, "This isn't big enough. I don't like this at all." And I thought, well, I guess I'm not doing this, right? And he said, "So, come up with something different." And I went, "Oh, I still get to do it?" Just gotta. And so he wanted something that was more expansive and more superhero-ish and all that kind of stuff. And I had something that was very noirish and very sort of small scale.
Okay.
I had actually Metamorpho was because of the unfortunate circumstances that turned him into a monster, basically.
Yeah.
He became an underground sort of enforcer and for hire. Mm-hmm. And then he sort of realized that he was getting into some stuff that there was, that was full of moral ambiguity. And suddenly he was like, I can't do this anymore. And then so he sort of becomes a hero at the end of it. And he was like, no, I want to do something bigger. And so that's why it ended up being this interdimensional thing. And then I wrote the interdimensional thing. He's like, yeah, this is good. And he goes, now we have to add Kanjuro. I'm like, what?
The space villain?
Yeah. I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, because we're going to use him in this, and so he needs to be in. And I'm like, well, how am I supposed to do that? And he says to me, he goes, "You're the writer. Don't ask me." So I had to go back with my story, and I was like, God, this works so well now, and I got to shove in Cantor, but I was able to make it work, but that's the kind of stuff you dealt with like all the time,
Wow.
and it was never, hey, I'm going to do this. And in fact, when I turned in my script for Wraith of God, I asked Dan, I said, I'd sent it to him, and a couple weeks went by, and I was talking to him about another project, that I was working on, and I said, "Hey, did you get a chance to read that Wraith of God thing?" And he goes, "Yeah, I did." He goes, "I liked it, but I made some changes to it." And I said, "I want some changes to it." And I said, "Okay, well, what?" And he goes, "I can't find my notes. They're around here someplace." And he never found his notes. And then we got off doing other things, and then he ended up getting let go before we ever got back to it. So I don't know what he wanted changed, but that's the type of thing you have to deal with, right? So he might have come back with something that I would have totally been like, "No, Dan, that's not the character. That's not what I'm trying to do." And then it's kind of like, then you're faced with the reality of, well, if I want to do this, I got to do it their way, or not do it at all. And so I guess it worked out that I got to do it myself. But
yeah, so you're able to see this question here from Pork Hunt.
Yes. Will your ideas for Metamorph will come up in a new character for Empire Comics? If it did, it would show up in Nightclub, because that's the kind of book Nightclub. It would fit something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see that.
So the Nightclub story in this new campaign introduces. I did a character value stamp like the old Marvel books did in the 70s, right? In the back of Wraith of God graphic novel.
Love it.
Love it.
Yeah.
And the character there is Eon Chance.
Yes.
And that character is a major player in my overall plans. And so he's going to show up in he'll have his official first appearance in the Nightclub story. Nice. And so we'll get a little bit, you guys will be happy. I don't give you too much information, but I give you a little bit of information about him, and a little bit of more information about Mr. Mystery, but not anything that you can hang your hat on. And so the Trunk character, the Elephant Man character, is sort of the central focus of the book, but I won't tell you why. I'll just let you read it. But yeah, in the future, that type of the thing with Garbage Man and Nightclub, they're both in Murnau City, which is named after F.W. Murnau, the German impressionist director that directed Nosferatu, the original silent version. Mm-hmm. And so the whole city is very Gotham City-like, but even more so. There's Titan Pharmaceuticals, which is responsible for creating Garbage Man. They're also responsible for creating a lot of other weird creatures and things like that. And so Murnau City is, on the darker side, is full of weird. Yeah, I know. Actually, I'm going after Mark Millar. So that's
Whoa, okay. Really?
Well, it all comes down to when you have something like that, it comes down to, number one, who put it out there first. And as far as I can find, I put it out there first. So, and Mark is really creating the stuff for Netflix. So it's really Netflix, not
a self-publishing thing. He's not doing it for himself.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, if you have a copyright issue, you're not really taking it up with Mark, you're taking it up with Netflix.
Yes.
So it's a battle that I could very well lose simply because I don't have the money. Mm-hmm. But it appears that I'm on the winning side of the actual law. But that's I probably shouldn't even be talking about this, but it's what do I care? But but it's being looked at. Let's just put it that way. And if I have alternatives if I have to change the name or whatever, but I'm not changing it unless I have to. And it's questionable right now whether actually I will have to. So we shall see.
Cool. Nice.
Those.
I was gonna say, so how far along are you into Wraith of God 2? When can we expect it? Or do you not know yet?
Well, I put August release date because so that'd be a year from now. Simply because I'm not sure what the printing situation is going to be like. In 8 months or when I get this done, and we could be looking at extra 2 or 3 month delay just to get your books done, which is basically what people were looking at this past spring. I mean, I had to fight like crazy to get mine done in 6 weeks, and then there was an issue with the proofs that had to be fixed, and so that delayed it even for another month. Right. So, trying to predict. I mean, when things were not, Joe Biden's economy, you could get a print job turned around in 2 to 3 weeks. Now it's 2 to 3 months or more. And what about paper availability? That sort of comes and goes. And so there's these factors that I put it as August, as fulfillment date. And again, this is a bigger book than Wraith of God. So, and that took me about 8 months, I want to say, to get done. So, we're looking at September, October, November, December, January, February, March, May. My guess would be I'd be done with it in May sometime.
Okay.
But then how quickly that gets back from the printer and I can fulfill it, that's anybody's guess. Okay. So it's going to be, because this, like I said, once we get to 100,000, there's 15 more pages being added to this. So you're looking at what is essentially going to be a 100-page book.
That's wild.
So you're getting, it's going to take a little bit more time than, say, a 64-page book would be. And there's a slight possibility that I would bring an inker in on the nightclub rather than ink it myself. And that would turn it around a little bit faster, but he would have to be available and willing to do it. And those are two very big ifs at this point. But the one thing you can count on from me is you're going to get weekly updates, and I'll let you know exactly where I'm at all the time. So you can sort of track the progress of the book and kind of, estimate when I'm going to be done and have it out to you. But for what I'm attempting to do here with a larger universe, it doesn't behoove me to take 1.5 years to do a book.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to get them out as fast as I can and still maintain the quality that I want to maintain. So, I think, I say this now, I didn't think I'd be doing a bigger book this time than I did last time. But
Grandpa T-Bear as the anchor.
Art's too busy with his own, man.
Yeah.
No, it's somebody outside our community, which means he probably, if he did it, he would probably have to do it as an alias, but I don't know that he's going to have time to do it anyway. So, but yeah, so I was going to say that, next one, I'm not going to do, it's not going to be as big, but I say that, and then it probably will be. It just, I haven't determined what. See, the more characters I introduce and the more stories I introduce, then you're going to have more people going, well, when do we get to see more of this? When do we get to see more of that? And you're like, well, but I've also got, what am I going to do with this? I got to introduce this. And so that means one of these things is going to suffer on the next campaign and maybe not show up. So I haven't actually figured out. Wraith of God definitely is going to be a feature in whatever I do, because that's kind of my flagship. But can I skip Garbage Man this next time and do something else? I don't know. We shall see.
That's true. So I guess we've been going for 2 hours. So kind of wrap it up. So I guess one final, looking back on your first campaign and going on your another one, what was the best advice you got starting a campaign, and what advice would you have for people wanting to start and going forward?
Well, one thing I learned, I tried to launch Garbage Man first, was the very first thing I tried to do. And I was just going to launch it as a trade paper, basically what it came out as, what you guys have in your hands from Dark Horse.
Yep.
I was going to do that on my own. And because it didn't have a lot of new material. I had about 18 pages of new material in there, was all. And it seemed like it'd be easy to do. But it wasn't. The single most important thing is visibility, right?
Yes.
Because I think they say that you're lucky if you get like 5 or 6% of the people that view your page will actually back your book. So that gives you an idea of the amount of the numbers, the volume of people that you have to get to see your campaign. And posting on social media is not enough. It seems like it would be enough because, oh yeah, I've got, on Twitter, I've got 9,000 followers. Okay, well, I've got 9,000 followers, but I got 2,600 backers, right, on the first campaign. So what happened to those other 7,000 people, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I've got 9,000 on Instagram. What happened to them? I've got 5,000 on Facebook, and then I've got my own art page on Facebook that has 9,000. And it's like, where are all these people? Why aren't they backing, right? Well, the reality is most of these people aren't going to back. So what I learned was I started my own YouTube channel, which I've been doing for over a year and a half now. And not only that, I got on other people's YouTube channels, right? So I'm regularly on Ethan's Comicsgate Kings channel. I'm our show. I'm regularly do the Professionals on Tuesday nights with Graham, Andy, Art, Fraga, Billy, and me. And I was doing that as well. This is before Comicsgate Kings. So I was doing the Professionals, and I had my own channel. And then I was like guesting on it, like your guys' show or whatever, as often as I could to raise my visibility. And so that is the number one key is depending on what your expectations are, you got to put the time in on just self-promotion so people are aware of you, right?
Right.
Yes.
I got 30 years in the industry, and I figured, I'll just ride that into success. And no, I failed miserably because I didn't put the work in ahead of time to establish my visibility for people. And it's amazing how you can work in an industry for 30 years and have thousands of people have no clue who you are. And I was able to do that successfully.
Yeah.
Work for 30 years and have no one know who I am. And so,
that's not true.
Well, it's amazing. A lot of the people we all talk to, like Frago's one, for example, our T-Bear, a lot of these, and as you as well, we know the work. A lot of people, they know the work. They've seen the work. They just don't know the name.
Right. They don't attach the two things.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. And that is very true. It's like, oh, you're the guy that worked on Wonder Woman? I didn't know that. Or you're the guy that worked on Planet Hulk? I didn't know that,
Or maybe like, you're the guy that worked on Sludge.
Yeah.
Holy crap. Yeah.
I remember that 25 years ago.
Yeah. I watched that cartoon. I remember that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the number one thing, right? Is increase your visibility as much as you can, and then just be prepared for the colossal, and that's not hyperbole, the colossal amount of work and time that it takes to do this. You're not just doing the project. You're promoting the project continuously. You're doing the work, of course, but then you have to manage, I had to hire a colorist. I had to hire a letterer. I had to hire a designer to come in and put the book together for me. I had to hire a proofreader to proofread the book. And this next time I'm going to hire 2 proofreaders to see if I can eliminate any mistakes. And then there's all the little stuff, right? You're constantly answering emails and you think, well, that's not a big a deal. Well, it is, because if you're trying to draw a book and you I get up at, say, I'm ready, I'm in front of my computer at 9 a.m., right? Well, you might be answering emails and answering questions about your campaign till noon, right? So now you've got 3 hours of your day has gone, you haven't even started drawing yet. Okay, and so then you have that, and then you have dealing with a printer, right? And so then it's getting quotes from a printer. Then you're negotiating with the printer because you don't like their price. And then they say, well, we can't get it to you for 3 months. You go, well, that's unacceptable. So you either come up with 2 months or I'm going over here and starting over. And so there's all this stuff. And it seems like, oh, it's just a few phone calls, but those few phone calls turn into hours, and that you're not actually producing any work. You're just working on organizing and getting your campaign out there. And then it goes to the printer, and then you're on the printer's case all the time. When am I going to see the proofs? And these proofs don't look good. Why does this look like this? You need to change this. Well, it's going to take 2 more weeks, and it's just, and then after all that, oh, you've got to order all your boxes and all your supplies and everything else. And you get this big dump of money, depending on how much your campaign earns. You're going to get this money dump at the end of the year, right? And you got no write-offs because all your expenses are going to occur next year. So you got to figure out, okay, well, can I print my trading card and all this other stuff before the end of the year so I can use those as write-offs against this huge amount of money that just got dumped in my lap? But then you're guesstimating how many cards you're going to need because your campaign's not over yet, and ordering boxes for shipping and all that kind of stuff. So you have those ready to go, and then you got to box everything, right? And you got to manage the mailing list and stuff. So it's just a colossal amount of work. And unless you really like that sort of organizational type of stuff and management type of stuff, which I happen to like, I'm not complaining. It's just a lot of work, but you have to enjoy that kind of being part of the process. And I think that's why a lot of people don't have a clear idea of all this extra. And that's why you see these guys, they'll raise money and then they'll bail.
Yeah.
They won't fulfill, because it's easy to sit here in front of the camera and show up on your guys' show and say, yeah, back Wraith of God. But then I got to do it. I got to produce 100 pages and I got to put it all together and I got to get it shipped out. And people don't want to do that. That's a lot of work. And the last thing you want to do is screw over your customers. So make sure it's what you really want to do and that you're really committed to the amount of work that's involved in doing it before you do it. That's my advice.
My next advice would be look out for Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam,
yeah,
he wants his cut.
Well, that's the thing, right? And it's and the thing that Indiegogo does, this is, I guess, inside baseball, maybe too deep into the weeds for people who don't care, but I'm going to tell you anyway, that they take a percentage of this, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But this is not a situation where they collect the money and say, this is Indiegogo money. I'm going to take my 10% or whatever it is, 8 point something percent. They take that money. Okay. So let's say you make $100,000. They take 8,000 of that, right? Yep. And they give you $92,000. Okay. Well, this is not a situation where they're on their taxes. They say we made $100,000 and we paid $92,000 to Aaron Lopresti. No, they say you made $100,000. And so it's incumbent on me to report to my taxes that I paid Indiegogo $8,000, right? So now instead of paying taxes on $92,000, I'm paying taxes on $100,000, even though I don't get all that money.
Wow.
And then that you can average about $10 per person shipping costs. That just as an average, okay? So if I have, say my campaign ends today and I have 1,000 backers, $10,000 of that money, whatever that number is going to shipping.
Yep.
Okay. So that's money that is not ever going to my pocket, but I'm still paying taxes on that $10,000 until I write it off. But I'm not writing it off until the next tax year. So it can get really tricky and ugly. So you really want to pay attention to that stuff and talk to an accountant if you don't have one, so you know what your responsibility is, and you don't spend that money and then realize you don't have enough to fulfill, or you don't have enough to pay your taxes. I know this stuff because I've been a freelancer for 30 years, and it's basically the same thing. I never got a royalty check of $100,000 that I was like, what am I going to do with this? How much of this goes to but that's what this feels like, right? Because they give you all the money at once, and then, or at least once the money you make before it goes in demand, right? Then the in-demand money is distributed on a monthly basis to you. So that's a little bit easier to manage. But that huge cash dump is very difficult to manage correctly especially if it comes at the end of the year. That's why I was hoping to get this campaign launched in June, so that I I could get a lot of the business expenses out of the way before the end of the year, but I'm going to be in the right exact same position I was with the original Wraith of God, where I'm getting this money dump in November, December, and it's too early for me to, get a bunch of write-offs. So then you just get nailed with taxes.
Wonderful.
Uncle Sam. Damn.
Yeah.
I spoke to a high school art class one time, and I got sidetracked and started talking about tax management and stuff, and to a high school class, right? And the guy was like, "Yeah, it was really good, but probably next time less about taxes and more about the art part of it." Because I was warning these kids.
Hear that, though. Those kids that age to hear that.
Right. I was like, I was warning these kids, if you're going to business for yourself as an artist, remember you need this, and they lose this much money in taxes. You got to put money away. Schedule C, and all this kind of stuff. And they're like, eyes are rolling over. And they're like, draw Spider-Man. Anyways,
I think we'll leave it there. That's good advice. Everyone go out, go to Indiegogo, back Wraith of God, Blood Hunters.
I think we got 1 or 2 new backers.
Yeah,
Yes,
we've got a couple backers from us.
yes, thank you guys very much. Appreciate that.
We try to push the Indiegogo stuff. Our viewers, they still don't quite get it yet. I feel like they're not used to it yet, but we're trying to get people to go to Indiegogo and Kickstarter and get used to this crowdfunding stuff. It feels like it's been around a while, but still a lot of people don't quite know about it.
Yes.
Well, if you look at the numbers, I mean, like I had a very successful campaign, but I had 2,600 backers. That's a failed book in the mainstream, right? So
yeah.
Well, I don't know now, but
well, they may be putting them out, but still failures. But if they go and people are used to going to the comic shop every Wednesday, getting their book, laying down their $5 or $6, whatever it is now, and walking out and getting your instant gratification. This is more of a long term.
Yeah,
and you trust somebody, right? I mean, you still, even when you go to a comic shop, you buy a book without reading it. You're hoping that Spider-Man's good this month, but you don't know if it's going to be. And they've got your money before you know if you just wasted it or not. So it's not any different than this, but you have to wait a while to get your book. And there still are people out there that don't fulfill. There's still unscrupulous people. I don't think it's as prevalent as it used to be because people are wiser about that kind of stuff. But it's still out there. So I can understand why this is it's still the wild, wild west of, independent comics or comics in general. And it's going to take a while for people to sort of settle in and say, okay, this is a reasonable way to do things and I can get behind it. But I think there's rewards to it too.
Like, $25, $30. It's like, yeah, but these are 70, 80 plus page books. It's like, these aren't comic books per se in the sense that it's, a 22, 23 page floppy. It's like, no, these are graphic novels basically.
Yeah.
It's
Alex, have you guys reviewed Alex Ross's Fantastic Four thing yet?
Yeah, we loved it.
Yeah.
It was terrific. Yeah.
Did you?
Yes.
That was a 64-page book. It was hardcover, granted, but a 64-page book for $25.
Yeah, that's fair.
I put out an 84-page soft cover for $25. So, and I know it's hard for people to kind of compare those things, but they're not. We're really not that far off.
But at the same time, you don't have a major publisher behind you like Alex Ross does. Yeah, he had Abrams behind him on that one. Mm-hmm. So yeah, people really take a step back to think about the money, where it's going, where it's coming from, the funding. It's like it should make sense after a while. But that's the thing.
If we were selling 30, 40, 50,000 copies of these things, they would be a lot cheaper. We'd be able to charge less for them because we'd be making that money back. But it's an expensive proposition producing your own book, and so we have to sort of charge more, and that's why it's easy kind of to add pages as you go, because it's like, oh, well, I made enough money to cover this, so now I can give you more for your $25, rather than promising you a bunch at the beginning and hoping to God that you make enough to pay for it.
and hoping eventually you'll fulfill. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yep. But yeah, I love the square bound books. I think they're well worth it. I think we try to spread the word as much as we can. And I foresee this as almost being the future. It's like we both backed Isom with what Young Ripa's doing with his book. And everyone's like, that's the new model. That's better than Comicsgate. Blah blah blah. He has his own thing. It's like, we'll see. Time will tell. Like everything,
you gotta have the audience to do what he did. You've got to have the audience, and most of us, singularly, other than Ethan, don't have that audience. We don't have an audience big enough to do it like that. So we have to sort of do it as a loosely associated group, so we can share each other's exposure. And but yeah, if I had 1 million followers, I'd probably go, I'm just gonna do this myself on my own website.
Right.
I'll let you know when I hit 1 million subs.
Yeah, please do.
Yes.
Same here. So all right, I think that's gonna about do it. We're gonna wrap it up.
We're gonna wrap it on up.
Wrap it on up. So everyone, please go out to Indiegogo, back Aaron Lopresti's Wraith of God Blood Hunters right now, live on Indiegogo.
Link is in the. I'm gonna put the link again in the chat. It's down there in the ticker. It's been down there in the ticker the whole night, but put it right here in the comments again.
There it is.
And Aaron, thanks once again for coming on. It's great to have you on again.
Yep.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate you having me. It was great having a chat and getting a little in depth into the story and stuff. It's fun. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And hopefully we can do this again when issue 2 comes out, and we can discuss that.
Yep. Love to have you back.
Great. Thank you guys.
Yeah. Welcome. So everyone, remember to buy what you like,
collect what you want,
don't listen to the haters, and we'll see you guys again next time.